Title: The Haunting on the Midnight Train. Once upon a time, there was a small, sleepy town nestled deep in the mountains, far away from the bustling cities. The town was peaceful, with its quaint houses, friendly people, and a train station that had seen better days. For years, the train station had been the heart of the town, with the old steam engine bringing travelers from distant places. But as time went on, the train service began to decline, and soon, only one train passed through each day, the midnight train. The midnight train was a source of mystery and fear for the townsfolk. They whispered about strange occurrences, ghostly figures, and eerie sounds that filled the night when the train approached. But no one dared to speak about it openly, for fear of what might happen. Among the townsfolk was a young man named Jacob. Jacob was an adventurous soul, always curious and eager to explore the unknown. He had heard the stories about the midnight train, but unlike the others, he didn't believe in ghosts or the supernatural. To him, the stories were just old wives' tales, meant to scare children and keep them from wandering at night. One cold winter night, Jacob decided to prove once and for all that the stories were nothing more than superstition. He made up his mind to board the midnight train and see for himself what lay beyond the veil of fear. His friends and family tried to dissuade him, but Jacob was determined. As the clock struck 11, Jacob made his way to the train station, his heart pounding with excitement. The station was deserted, its old wooden benches creaking in the cold wind. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows on the walls, but Jacob remained undeterred. He bought a ticket from the sleepy station master, who eyed him with a mix of concern and pity. "Are you sure about this, son?" the station master asked, his voice trembling slightly. Jacob nodded confidently. "It's just a train ride. I'll be back before you know it." The station master sighed and handed him the ticket, muttering a prayer under his breath. Jacob sat on the platform, waiting for the train to arrive. The minutes ticked by slowly, and the cold seemed to seep into his bones. Finally, in the distance, he heard the faint sound of a whistle. The sound grew louder, and soon, the midnight train came into view, its headlights piercing through the darkness like eyes in the night. The train was old, its black paint chipped and faded, and its windows covered with a thick layer of grime. It screeched to a halt in front of Jacob, the sound echoing through the empty station. The doors creaked open with a loud groan, inviting him inside. Jacob hesitated for a moment, but then he took a deep breath and stepped onto the train. The interior was dimly lit, with flickering lights casting eerie shadows on the worn-out seats. The air was heavy with the scent of dust and something else, something he couldn't quite place. Jacob walked down the aisle, noticing that the train was completely empty. There were no other passengers, no conductor, and no sign of life. But he wasn't afraid. Instead, he felt a thrill of excitement as he sat down in a seat near the window. As the train began to move, Jacob gazed out the window, watching the town fade into the distance. The train picked up speed, and soon, it was racing through the darkness, the landscape outside a blur of shadows. Jacob's excitement slowly began to wane as the minutes turned into hours. The darkness outside was impenetrable, and the train seemed to be traveling faster than any train he had ever been on. He glanced at his watch, but the hands seemed to be frozen in place. A sense of unease began to creep over him, but he brushed it off. "It's just my imagination," he told himself. "I'm just tired." Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the train into complete darkness. Jacob's heart skipped a beat as he fumbled for his phone to use as a flashlight. But when he turned it on, the screen remained black, unresponsive to his touch. Panic started to set in as he realized that something was terribly wrong. He stood up, trying to make his way to the front of the train, but the darkness was disorienting. As he stumbled down the aisle, he heard a soft whisper behind him. "Jacob." He froze, his breath catching in his throat. The whisper was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. He turned around, but there was no one there, just the empty seats and the darkness. "Who's there?" Jacob called out, his voice trembling. There was no answer, just the sound of the train moving through the night. But then, he heard it again, a soft, eerie whisper, closer this time. "Jacob, come to me." Jacob's heart raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. He knew he was alone on the train, he had checked every car. So who, or what, was calling his name? Desperate for answers, Jacob hurried to the front of the train, hoping to find the conductor. But when he reached the conductor's car, it was empty. There was no one there, just an old, dusty uniform hanging on a hook. Jacob's fear grew as he realized that he was completely alone. The train suddenly lurched, throwing Jacob off balance. He grabbed onto a seat to steady himself, his mind racing. The train was moving faster than ever, the sound of the wheels on the tracks growing louder and more ominous. Jacob knew he had to find a way to stop the train, or at least figure out where it was taking him. He made his way to the control panel, but it was covered in dust and cobwebs, as if it hadn't been used in years. He frantically searched for a way to stop the train, but nothing seemed to work. As he struggled with the controls, the whispers grew louder, filling the air around him. "Jacob, you can't escape." The words sent a chill down his spine, but he refused to give in to the fear. "I won't let this train take me," he muttered to himself, his determination growing. But just as he thought he might have found a way to stop the train, the whispers turned into screams. The sound was deafening, echoing through the train like the cries of lost souls. Jacob covered his ears, trying to block out the noise, but it was no use. The screams seemed to be coming from all directions, filling his mind with terror. He stumbled backward, tripping over something on the floor. When he looked down, he saw a pair of old, worn-out shoes, still attached to the feet of a ghostly figure. The figure was transparent, its face twisted in anguish, its eyes hollow and empty. Jacob gasped in horror as more ghostly figures began to appear, their bodies flickering like candles in the wind. They reached out to him, their hands cold and clammy, their voices filled with despair. "Help us, save us." Jacob tried to back away, but the figures closed in on him, their faces filled with sorrow and pain. He could feel their icy touch on his skin, their presence suffocating him. Desperate, he pushed through them, trying to escape their grasp. But the ghosts were relentless, their cries for help echoing in his ears. "Please, we don't want to be here." Jacob's heart ached with pity and fear, but he knew he had to keep moving. He couldn't let them trap him on this haunted train. As he ran through the train, the ghostly figures followed him, their voices growing louder and more desperate. Jacob knew he had to find a way to help them, to free them from whatever curse had bound them to the train. But he didn't know how. The train seemed to be a prison for these lost souls, and he was now trapped with them. The whispers and screams continued to haunt him as he made his way to the back of the train. There, he found a door leading to the outside, but it was locked. Jacob pounded on the door, desperate to escape, but it wouldn't budge. In his despair, he noticed something strange, a faint glow coming from the floor beneath him. Curious, he knelt down and lifted a loose floorboard, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, he found an old, dusty journal, its pages yellowed with age. Jacob opened the journal, his hands trembling as he began to read. The journal belonged to the train's original conductor, who had written about strange occurrences on the midnight train. The entries grew more frantic with each passing day, describing how the train had become cursed, trapping the souls of those who died aboard it. According to the journal, the only way to break the curse was to confront the source of the train's haunting. The conductor had tried to do so, but he had failed, becoming one of the trapped souls himself. Jacob realized that if he didn't find the source of the haunting, he would suffer the same fate. Determined to break the curse, Jacob gathered his courage and made his way back through the train. The ghosts followed him, their eyes pleading for salvation, but Jacob focused on finding the source. As he moved through the train, he felt a strange pull, guiding him toward the rear car. When he reached the last car, Jacob found a large, ornate mirror, its surface cracked and tarnished. The mirror seemed to pulsate with an otherworldly energy, and Jacob knew that this was the source of the haunting. He stepped closer, his reflection distorted and ghostly in the cracked glass. As he stared into the mirror, he saw the faces of the trapped souls, their eyes filled with sorrow and pain. But there was something else, something darker lurking within the mirror's depths. A shadowy figure emerged, its form shifting and changing, its eyes burning with malice. The figure spoke. In a voice that sent chills down Jacob's spine. "You dare to challenge me?" the figure hissed, its voice dripping with venom. Jacob swallowed his fear and stood his ground. "I won't let you trap me here," he declared, his voice steady despite the terror he felt. The figure laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed through the train. "You are too late," it sneered. "This train is mine, and so are the souls aboard it. You cannot save them." But Jacob refused to give in. He reached out to the mirror, determined to break the curse and free the trapped souls. As his fingers touched the cold glass, the figure let out a piercing scream. The mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces, the shards scattering across the floor. The train lurched violently, throwing Jacob to the ground. For a moment, everything was still, the air heavy with silence. But then, one by one, the ghostly figures began to fade, their faces peaceful as they were finally freed from their torment. Jacob watched as the last of the ghosts disappeared, their voices filled with gratitude. "Thank you," they whispered as they vanished into the night. The train began to slow down, the screeching of the wheels growing softer. Jacob stood up, his body aching from the ordeal, but his heart filled with relief. He had done it, he had broken the curse and freed the souls trapped on the haunted train. As the train came to a stop, Jacob made his way to the door. This time, it opened easily, and he stepped out onto the platform. To his surprise, the station was filled with light and warmth, the town bathed in the soft glow of dawn. The once eerie and deserted station was now alive with the sound of birds chirping and the smell of fresh morning dew. Jacob took a deep breath, the crisp morning air filling his lungs. He looked back at the train, which now appeared old and worn, as if it had been abandoned for years. The station master, who had sold him the ticket, was standing on the platform, a knowing smile on his face. "You did it, son," the station master said, his voice filled with admiration. Jacob nodded, too exhausted to speak. The station master patted him on the back, his eyes filled with respect. "Not many have the courage to face their fears, but you did. The town owes you a great debt." Jacob smiled faintly, his mind still reeling from the night's events. He knew that he had done something important, something that would be remembered for generations. But more than that, he had learned a valuable lesson about courage, fear, and the power of belief. As the sun rose over the mountains, Jacob walked away from the station, his steps slow and measured. He knew that life would never be the same after what he had experienced, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The haunting on the midnight train had come to an end, but the memory of that fateful night would stay with him forever. And so, the midnight train became a legend in the town, a tale of bravery and redemption that was passed down from generation to generation. The old steam engine was eventually retired, and the train station became a place of history, a reminder of the courage of one young man who dared to face the unknown. But some say that on certain nights, when the moon is full and the air is thick with mystery, you can still hear the faint whistle of the midnight train as it passes through the town. And if you listen closely, you might even hear the whispers of the souls who were freed from their eternal torment, thanking the one who saved them. The end.